Dankeschön. I think this is the biggest crowd I've ever seen for a Noir City night of films. This is fantastic. So thank you very much for turning out for this. About 5 years ago, I became obsessed with the idea of actually doing a Noir City International Film Festival because my interest in film noir began many, many years ago, and it had everything to do with mid-20th century America and exploring what that was all about and how cinema sort of changed at that time, how the culture changed at that time. I still think it's the absolute most fascinating part of American history, that immediate post-World War II era when everything sort of changed and America lost its innocence. And even though we had helped save the world, we became aware that things weren't quite as rosy and optimistic as we thought they were at the core of our own society. So all of this became something that was a great subject of study for me. And as I went along, it became apparent to me that, guess what? We weren't alone in this. The first clue should have been that it was called film noir to begin with. And how many times did you have to hear that at the root of it was German expressionism? Yes, yeah. And how many times did you have to hear that your favorite noir filmmakers, Robert Siodmak and Billy Wilder and Otto Preminger, all learned how to make movies at the film capital of the world, Berlin, right? So there is this very international thing going on. And I didn't want to do the international festival until I felt that I had secured enough really good prints of these films from around the world. And I could, oh boy, you are in the wrong place. Turn that off. This is 1948, damn it. I wanted to make sure that we had a sufficient breadth of films to show you to kind of make the impression. I mean, it's easy to find French film noir. It's easy to find British film noir. It's not as easy to find Japanese film noir, Argentinian film noir, Spanish film noir, Norwegian film noir from 1949. But we have representative examples of all of those in this festival. I'm not just saying this as being a showman or a pitch man for this, but I hope you have a pass, because to get the full impact of this festival, you do have to sort of immerse yourselves in it and experience this sort of world tour, the tour of darkness, circa 1949, where you're going to see so many similarities between these films, regardless of their country of origin, and some very striking differences. Like this film, the Norwegian film would never have been made the way it's made if it had been done in the United States. So it's a real significant exploration of these various cultures, but what unites them all is this sort of noir ethos that, yes, it's a bitter little world. I also want to thank the trailer for Noir City, the international edition, was done by a really terrific young filmmaker in San Francisco named Joe Talbot, 22 years old. I love the fact that we get these young people involved. And the short film that preceded Carl's talk was made by Serena Bramble. Some of you who've been coming here for a few years have seen her work before. She is also 22 years old, so I'm very happy to say that these young filmmakers are very inspired and influenced by noir and sort of carrying the torch. Okay, having done the big pitch for the International Festival, we're now going to show you 2 English language films. just to ease you into this, get started slowly, okay? But the reason I chose to start with these films is because a lot of people have noted this pairing of movies, Journey into Fear and The Third Man. They said, oh, it's a Orson Welles double bill or a Joseph Cotten double bill. But the real reason behind pairing these films is because of the 2 writers. Eric Ambler, the author of Journey into Fear, and Graham Greene, the author of The Third Man, are 2 of the most significant novelists of international intrigue of the 20th century, and they had a very deep understanding of international geopolitics, and they were both started writing right before the advent of World War II, through it, and documented its aftermath, and they were geniuses in this regard. So we're going to start tonight with Journey into Fear, based on an Eric Ambler novel about the set during wartime. And Eric Ambler was a very, very interesting guy who I love this, that his wife later in life was a woman named Joan Harrison, who was Alfred Hitchcock's protege. She was originally Hitchcock's secretary in England and traveled with him to the United States when he moved to Hollywood, and became a very, very successful producer in her own right, and was one of the preeminent women producing noir films in Hollywood in the 1940s, and then in the 1950s went on to be the driving force behind Alfred Hitchcock's television show. Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the Alfred Hitchcock Hour were both produced by Joan Harrison, and she was Eric Ambler's wife. And anyway, as you'll see in this film, he has a real knack for the international intrigue. You are about to see a mangled movie. There's no way around that. This was the last film that Orson Welles was going to make under contract for RKO. A man named George Schaefer worked at RKO, brought him to Hollywood from New York, where he had, of course, become a success to scandal with the War of the Worlds and his Broadway productions. And when he came to Hollywood, of course, he had this rare carte blanche contract with RKO where he could make whatever he wanted to make. He proceeded to make the greatest movie ever made, starting out with Citizen Kane. But then he didn't do things the way Hollywood liked them done. The Magnificent Ambersons was taken away from him. It was cut. It was a mutilated version of its once great self. Welles could never finish things that he started. And so while Journey into Fear was being planned, he decided to jet off to South America to make this film called It's All True, which is a lost, failed film. And he had to come back to Hollywood because there were problems with Journey into Fear, because George Schaefer was fired at RKO and Welles had no supporters left at the studio. So the new bosses said, take that 101-minute movie, it's a mess, try to fix it, and if you can't, we're just going to cut it down to a B film and release it at 68 minutes long. And this is what survives of what was once a 101-minute movie. Now, my understanding is, I was surprised that we actually got the British version of this film, which somehow made its way back to Warner Brothers, which now owns the RKO library. So this film is actually 3 to 4 minutes longer than the original US released 68-minute version of the film. I mean, keeping track of this stuff is a full-time job. But it is kind of a remarkable document because, I mean, is it a mangled film or is it just a work of audacious, innovative, really clever filmmaking as a B film? The entire Mercury Theater is put to use in this film. If you know, Welles made his mark in radio before he ever got to Hollywood, and his entire cast and crew from the Mercury Theater is in this film. Joseph Cotton, Agnes Moorehead, Ray Teal, everybody, including a man named Jack Moss, who is the assassin in the film, who was actually a production manager and Orson Welles' manager at one time, that they just threw a trench coat on him and said, Jack, you're playing the assassin. This is kind of the fly-by-night aspect of this whole production. But I find it to be an absolutely mesmerizing film. And Welles, of course, is in it. He plays Colonel Haki, a Turkish police officer. He loved to wear the costumes and the beards and everything. So it's a real treat to be able to show this in a really good 35mm print. For years it was not available. So I'm very happy that our little international excursion begins tonight with the great Orson Welles and Journey into Fear. Enjoy. Thank you.